Hello. Today I'm going to introduce you to the concept of augmented sixth chords. Augmented sixth chords are a color chord. They don't really have a root per se, and they aren't really built on any particular diatonic chord. You know, a secondary dominant, you could say, is kind of like an alteration of a diatonic chord to make it actually the dominant chord of some other diatonic chord in the key. And you could say that about a lot of chromatic chords. In this particular case, the augmented sixth chords really just exist as entities in themselves. They probably came about as a result of voice leading, adjustments and changes, and they've kind of become settled into these primarily three different categories. There is a fourth one that we'll look at in a second video. So, what are these augmented sixth chords? Well, they have these geographic names that really don't mean anything other than that they are a label for the particular type of chord. So there's an Italian sixth, a French sixth, and a German sixth. These are all what are generally called the Italian augmented sixth chord, the French augmented sixth chord, the German augmented sixth chord. And so what do we even mean by that? Well, let's look at the various aspects that these chords have in common and where they are indeed different, because obviously if they all had everything in common, we wouldn't need three names. So there are some things that are common in the Italian, the French and the German. You find these same things in all of them, and then there are a few things that are just a little bit different. We're going to identify those things right now, and then after that we'll go into a second video where we talk about how do you deal with these chords when you're voice leading them. So what do they have in common? Well, the first thing that we observe about all three of these chords, and I'll put the three of them up here, I'll put them in treble clef, and we'll imagine that we're doing this in C major or C minor. It doesn't matter, they can exist in major or in minor. Again, you have to make chromatic alterations to have them exist anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it's in major or minor. They are used in both. So I will write all three of them up here, and I'll write them in C major. You'll see immediately that they could equally work in C minor. Now, the first thing that I'd like to say is that they are all built on the sixth scale degree, as in minor. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, if you were starting in minor, then you can use the sixth scale degree. If you're going to build one of these in major, then you have to use the sixth scale degree as though you were in minor. That is to say, it would be in C major, you would use an A flat. If you're in C minor, the A is already flat, so no problem there. But if you're building these in major, you have to use the sixth scale degree from the parallel minor, the sixth scale degree as though you were in minor. So in this case, if we're, let's say, in C major, all of these are going to be starting on an A flat. And they're going to start on an A flat because that is the sixth scale degree in minor. Even if we're building it in major, we start with the sixth scale degree as though we were in minor. So built on the sixth scale degree as in minor, right? As though you were in minor. The second point, they all have an augmented sixth interval above that starting note. And that's where the term Italian augmented sixth comes from. These are sometimes just referred to as the augmented sixth chords as well. So they all have this augmented sixth interval. Now, what is an augmented sixth? Well, I'm going to have to trust that you know how to figure that out. But if you were starting on A flat, an augmented sixth would be an F sharp. So the augmented sixth interval, A flat to F sharp, would be common to all of these three different types of augmented sixth chords. So these are things they have in common. The third thing that they all have in common is they all have the tonic of the key that you are working in. They all have the tonic. So in this case we're in C major, so they all have a C in them. Those are the elements that all three of these chords have in common. They all start on the sixth scale degree as though you were in the minor key. They all have an augmented sixth interval. And they all have the tonic from the key in them. That is common to all augmented sixth chords. Now, where they start to differ from one another is in the things you do next, the notes you add next. So in the case of the Italian sixth, in fact, this is it. There is nothing else to add. This is the Italian sixth. It has these three notes. because you're often going to be writing this in 4 parts, you're going to need to double one of those notes. And when we talk about the notes that you double and we talk about voice leading, we'll discuss which of those notes you double, although you can probably already guess which one it is if the tonic is part of it. So anyway, we'll get to that in the next video. The Italian Augmented 6, done, no problem. Once you've checked all the things that are common to all of them, that is, as it happens, also the Italian Augmented 6. Now, if you want to do the French Augmented 6, then you have to add a major second above the tonic. Right? Find the tonic note, add a major second, that creates the French Augmented 6 chord. It has a kind of a jazzy feel to it, a jazzy sound to it. It's kind of nice, it's colourful. So this is the French Augmented 6 chord. If you want to create the German Augmented 6 chord, then you add a minor third above the tonic. And so I'm going to have to adjust the notes a little bit here just so you can see them a bit more clearly. So you add a minor third, remember that's an F sharp there. Okay? So you add a minor third above the tonic. Alright? So those are the 3 types of Augmented 6 chord. The Italian, the French, and the German Augmented 6. What they have in common, they're all built on the 6th scale degree as though you were in minor. They all have the Augmented 6 interval from that starting point. And they all have the tonic note of the key. That's what they have in common. Where are they different? Once you've done the 3 things that are in common, that is the Italian 6. You add a major second above the tonic for the French 6. You add a minor third above the tonic for the German 6. You always kind of start from the Italian, create the French, come back to the Italian, create the German. You're not continually adding notes. And once you get to the French and German 6, you've got 4 notes. So in 4-part harmony, you just assign 1 note per voice part. You got it taken care of. The only one you need to worry about any kind of doubling is in the Italian 6. And as I say, we'll talk about that in the next video. Just before I finish, there is something worth observing about this particular Augmented 6 chord. You'll notice that this creates a major triad, A flat, C, E flat. And if I respell this top note from an F sharp to a G flat, that is in fact A flat, C, E flat, G flat, which would become a major minor 7 sound. I mention that only at the end of this video as something to observe about the Augmented 6, the German Augmented 6 chord. It is enharmonically, it shares the same sound world as a dominant 7 chord. And as you can imagine, that gives it some flexibility and some power, if you will, within harmonic progressions, that if it is interpreted in different ways, it can kind of lead you in different directions. Just store that in the back of your mind. Primarily at this point, we're worried about it acting and functioning as a German Augmented 6 chord. So we have the Italian, we have the French, we have the German, we have what is in common and what is different. If you can learn that, then when you feel comfortable with that, go on to the second video in which we'll talk about how you actually voice lead these in 4-part harmony in a common practice style. Thank you.